We are officially out of Kuma's flashback and in present day again with the hype, with Luffy, with the crew, with all the craziness. Keeping in mind that I haven't read chapter 1105 yet, so please don't spoil me in the comments. And I wanted to chat with you, just briefly, a quick video chat with you about some things that I've been reflecting on that I love about the series, and a series that I love, and a series that does so many things so amazingly. One thing that I super love about this series is that it's not dependent on the main character, the main cast, the main dreams that we're supporting in them, that the series is about them, but it's also bigger than them. This is a series where multiple times we've been drawn away from our characters and their core impact on the story or motivations for the story or dreams for the story and focused on someone entirely different. And there are times when we're focused on our main character, Luffy, but the crew, some of or all of them, are absent for months at a time, if you're week to week. For months at a time. We're not even checking in with them. In the current place where we are in the story with Egghead, we've had this multiple times recently. First we went out into the world and we were checking in on what everybody else was doing, and then we got back to the crew only to leave again to go to what is one of the greatest flashbacks of the entire story. And I don't miss them when they're gone. Don't hear me wrong. I love Luffy and I love our main crew and I love following their dreams and their story and their impact on the story. But I also love that this story is so strong that it can take its time to go wider, and that doesn't hurt the story that's being told. A huge thing that I love about the story is how living and breathing this world is. When we go to a new island, that island is its own world. This is kind of like a portal fantasy, just a very interconnected one. So you go to a new island and this island has its own people, it has its own cultures, its own beliefs, its own ecosystem, its own rulers, and the challenges that come with that, the way that these people are being harmed, the needs that they have that are unique to him, and their own unique stories. The side characters on these islands aren't tools to get the main characters to their goals, ultimately. They aren't props that hold up the main crew or that support what the plot is supposed to be doing, or at least that's not all they are. They aren't just side characters that exist for the main characters to play off of and to reinforce the themes. They do all that, but that's not their sole existence. They have their own stories. They have their own backstories. They have their own motivations, dreams, goals, and deficits, all on their own apart from the crew. And while the crew steps in to take part of their story for a moment, it's not their whole story. When the crew leaves, their story keeps going. When we see those characters again later on in the story, they've moved. The world has continued breathing without us. The world has continued changing and growing without us. So we have to play catch up. We have to see how they've changed over the course of time because their story didn't pause when the main characters left. And while each arc does tie into the main themes of the story, they also have their own distinct themes. Like Fishman Island, that has its own culture, its own system at play, and that ties into the wider world, but also we're going to explore racism. Or Alabasta, that is in a desert land removed from everything, and with Crocodile we tie into the larger scheme of things, but we're going to focus on sacrifice while we're there. Whole Cake Island is this Alice in Wonderland-esque fairy tale, and the many different cultures and tribes that collect there tie into the rest of the world, but we're also going to be focusing on family trauma. Marineford is this epic battle that the entire world comes together to participate in, but we're really gonna zero in on the cost of war and the trauma of a loved one lost. And I'm just mentioning the larger core themes in each arc, but in each one of these arcs, there's dozens of smaller themes, dozens of minor themes going on in these as well. Just saying Whole Cake Island is about family trauma is definably wrong, but it's a good starting point of what the arc tackles. Each arc and the characters that they focus on tie into the greater story, and Luffy and his crew do get to step in and be a big part of the liberation of those people and of those areas. But and so it does tie into the greater story, but each island also has isolated stories that belong just to them. Just the same, the villains are not just the baddie of the day. They're not just the villain of that area. You have villains that have their own stories, their own backstories, their own things that made them what they are today. You have Moria, who once tried to become a pirate king, the pirate king himself. He once went after the One Piece too, but he lost his entire crew, and now he's a shadow of who he once was, and now he doesn't try anymore, and he lets his lackeys do it all for him, and he plays with shadow magic to tie in with his own story. But then also right before, soon after, what's the order of the arcs? Right before, yeah, it is. So we see Moria, who went after the One Piece and lost his entire crew, and this happened right before Luffy was to lose his entire crew. But Luffy's response isn't going to be to give up and become a villain or manipulate others to accomplish his goals because he can't have a Nakama anymore. Instead, he fights for his Nakama. Instead, he works to become stronger and tells his Nakama to do the same. So we get to see the villains and their individual stories, how that ties into what they've become today, and how that also ties into the grander story, and how that ties into Luffy and the world and all of that as well. Villains like Katakuri, who has family dynamics that inform why he fights. Defending his sister informs what makes him who he is, his own scars, his own trials that he's been through that made him who he is, that make him such a stronger character. Or you can look at villains that on introduction look surface level when they're kicking puppies and throwing old women out windows, but then we spend a little bit of time with them and we realize that they've experienced deeper traumas that they're now protecting themselves and their loved ones from ever having to experience again. And then that story ties into a story from a totally different arc, and then that story ties into a worldwide conflict, which ties back to Luffy. For me, in a story, having really well built and well fleshed out side characters is really important to me. I don't want them to just be, you know, the main cast is really well built up and then the side characters are these cardboard fixtures that the main characters can play off of, but they themselves don't have any sort of depth or characterization. They don't have their own backstories. They don't have their own motivations and traumas and trials and their own arcs alongside that. And it's difficult to create a world where side characters are given that much attention to detail because you've only got so much time to tell your story. But many stories do this well, to be clear. Many stories do this well. But One Piece does this extraordinarily. So I think of arcs like Dressrosa, where Doflamingo, a big part of what made Dressrosa great is Doflamingo, is getting his backstory, learning what experiences he had that shaped who he ended up becoming, what happened to him, what life experiences he lived through that led to him making the choices that he made that got him to the person that we know today. Or I think about Rebecca and Kairos, yeah. Rebecca and Kairos, who getting to know their past and their backstory helps us to see how Doflamingo's actions, his need for control and the way he controls and the way he steals individuality, the way he makes everything look so happy and joyful on the surface, but in fact, he's a puppet master putting this entire kingdom on strings, forcing them to forget their connections, their identity, their history with one another, or at least some of them. And anyway, it shows focusing in on these individuals not only gives them their own story and builds out those characters so much, but it also shows the effect that the villain is having, not on the wider scale conflict, not on, oh, the kingdom, look at what he's doing to the kingdom, but it takes us in to the individual so we can practically see how the individual is harmed. It helps to remind us what we're fighting for. Yes, we're fighting for Luffy's dream, absolutely, always, but his dream to become the Pirate King can only take us so far. His dream to have freedom and to follow his own path can only take us so far. It reminds us that we're also fighting for the individuals. Luffy is fighting for the individuals. He doesn't just care about his dream and his freedoms. He wants individuals to be able to pursue their dreams and to have their freedoms as well. And zeroing in on the living, breathing world, their backstories, their motivations, their trials, taking the spotlight off of the main character and putting it on these side characters that we're not even gonna see again for a while, gives us that closeness to the world, that closeness to the individuals, the feeling that this world is bigger than Luffy. So many fantasy stories, so many stories feel like the main character stepped in and then the world started moving. The main character leaves and the world dies back down. The world moves around the main character. The main character has a new goal, has a new trial, has a new trauma. The world molds and shifts around it. That's obviously not what you want, but that is how a lot of worlds feel. One Piece doesn't. One Piece regularly takes the spotlight off of our main crew, their dreams, their goals, their desires, and shifts the focus for long periods of time to other places in the world, to other people's stories, which makes it feel so much more real. Because it shows us that the world doesn't revolve around this crew, even though this crew is special. My goodness, Luffy is the sun god. This crew is very special. Nico Robin is the sole survivor of the Ohara incident, and she's the only way that we can read the poneglyphs. There is lots of specialness in this crew, but the world doesn't revolve around them. They may be special, but they're not it. They're not what the world is for. They just happen to be in it. And there's a whole lot of other special characters too. There's a whole lot of other characters that have their stories to live out too. And that's what this story feels like. And to do that, and for it not to suffer, for it not to hurt, for it not to ache when the main characters are just gone, is impeccable writing. Which naturally leads us to present day. We are in Egghead and we just spent a whole bunch of time away from our crew. We have spent months exploring a character who previous to this arc has been depicted as a mindless robot with hints that he's not totally gone, as well as the people that are connected with him, some of which we didn't even know before this flashback and will never see again after it. And yet it was one of the greatest parts of One Piece for me. And I think it says a lot about the series that in the popularity rankings, in the popularity polls, the main crew is always at the top, but they're surrounded by, and sometimes some of them are even beaten by, characters that are not in the main crew. I think it says a lot about the story that for a lot of people, it's easy to come up with your top 5 characters even if you put in a stipulation, no straw hats. And it's like, okay, easy, this, 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 and this. I think it says a lot about a story that it constantly deviates from the main crew and focuses on other characters, and the fandom is happy to go with it. They're not groaning, oh great, it's this perspective chapter again. That's a novel in me, novel reader in me talking. But you know, it's, oh great, we're moving away from the straw hats again. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people that do feel that way, but the fandom as a whole, I don't hear that complaint very often. Usually we're like, sweet, give us more world, give us more lore, tell us more about this character. And the fact that when One Piece is done, there is a myriad of potential material still there. Go follow that character. Tell me more about their backstory. Take me through their life's adventures. How did they get to where they were when they started the series? Or continue the story of that character over there. Take me on a side quest of that character over there. The world is so alive with such extravagant characters that if there were a million different spin-offs, I would keep reading. I wouldn't stop reading. I'm not asking Oda to do that because I do believe that he deserves to rest when he finishes One Piece, but if he decided to do it, I would be reading it. Personally, many of my favorite characters are very popular characters. Characters that you probably love too. Corazon, Kuma, Bonnie, Buggy, Pops, Law. But some of my favorite characters are also really abstract characters. Like if you asked me, top 5 not Straw Hat characters, one of the people in my list would be Toto from Alabasta. The old man who never stopped digging, that never lost faith and waited for the rain. To this day, when I think about the panel of him looking up and smiling as the rain starts falling, it gets me choked up. I don't expect to ever see him again, and he will never not be incredibly special to me. And plenty of series do this. Plenty of series focus on the individual to emphasize the impact and the cost of what's happening in the story. Plenty of stories take us away from the main character for an extended period of time. And I'm not trying to detract from those other stories by talking about this one, by talking about why I love it in this one so much. It's just incredibly rare to see it done on this scale, and that it's just as strong when we step away from the main characters, but when we come back, we all cheer and we can't wait to see them thrive again. One Piece is an incredibly long story, and it's a detractor for a lot of people to get started because of how much there is to read, but I think that were it not this long, we would miss some essential pieces of what makes this story so extraordinary, and this is one of them. It's the deep, rich exploration of the world and the characters living inside of it. It's the fact that our main characters, while they are main characters, while they are extremely important, extremely special, extremely talented, they're not it. The world doesn't revolve around them. The world is living and breathing without them, and it's incredibly important and valuable and worth reading, even if they were removed. Thankfully, they're not. But I just love that this story has built up such incredible main characters, but also the story is bigger than just the main characters. One of my favorite things in literature, manga, novels, whatever, is when a world feels so real that when I run out of pages, when the main conflict and the main goals are all handled and it's time for their story to come to a close and I run out of pages to read, that it feels like the world's gonna keep moving though. The story is going to continue. Even though I've run out of material to read of it, it's still going without me. I love that feeling. And this story accomplishes that really, really well for me. It's truly an epic. And I love it. I know I'm not telling you anything new, but I just kind of wanted to gush about something that I've been reflecting on and appreciating about this story lately, and I've kind of mentioned here and there in other videos, but I've never done a video talking about, man, I love this world, and I love this element of how it's written. Anyway, that's all. That's the video. So I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel. We're gonna talk about Naruto soon because I just finished part 1, so that'll happen next week. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays on the book channel, always linked in the description. Chat with me more about this in the comments. I would love to hear from you about what you love about this story, about what you love about this world. You know, if there's anything that I've said that you want to expand on or push back on, please do. I'll see you again soon.